sandwiches, ice cream, coffee and snacks, and many other pleasing treats. Our foods are fresh and tasty, our drinks satisfying and refreshing. They're so good.
Welcome to Average Joe's Drive-In.
And now, on with the show.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 100 of Average Joe's Drive-In. And with me this week, celebrating 100 episodes of Average Joe's Drive-In, is my friend and author, Morgan Sylvia. How are you doing? Welcome back.
I am doing great, and congrats on hitting 100 episodes. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. It's like one of those things like a lot of podcasts and shows, you know, they celebrate when they hit 100 and do some like big crazy weird thing, and it's like I didn't really plan it out that well. So it was just like, you know, it's like, well, you know, plus the last couple weeks between I've been so sick the last couple weeks getting over a cold, and we've had to reschedule this a few times, and it's just been, yeah, so it's been kind of a weird road to get to 100, but we're here now. It's going to be an awesome episode. We got a lot of stuff to talk about, and so when we talked last time, I think you had just put out ABODE and you were working on some other stuff, but you hadn't really, you know, made any final plans with that. And since that time, because it's been about a year, I think, or maybe a little over a year since you were on the show. And
wow, has it?
Yeah.
It goes by so fast.
It goes by quick, yeah. So, you know, you were talking about this, you know, that you were working on some other stuff and blah, blah, blah. Well, now, flash forward to now, and you have been on just a tear for this last year. So tell everybody a little bit about what's been going on with you.
Well, my plans for world domination are coming along a little bit slower than I was thinking, but I should be taking over everything, you know, hopefully within the next couple of years. On a more serious note on the writing end, yeah, I put out ABODE came out in 2017, I believe. I'm getting old because now I can't even remember what happened in what year. Yeah,
I think it was towards like the end of 2017 because I remember I think picking it up in around Christmas maybe or a little.
That sounds
before
that sounds about right. Yeah, it actually officially launched at Nikon, and then which is kind of in the middle, almost getting towards the end of July, so kind of like the tail end of summer. So yeah, that was my first horror novel. And then this year, as far as novels, Crossroad Press, they're actually Mystique, which is an imprint of Crossroad Press. They put out Dawn, which is the first book of a fantasy trilogy. And then I've also had quite a few, well, I guess not that many, but I've had some short stories come out. The most recent things, or I guess most current things I've got coming out as far as short stories is I have a cool haunted house story, or I like it anyway. It's the haunted house short stories from Flame Tree. And then early February, I have a story in Final Summons, which is the first anthology from the New England Spec Fic writers. And yeah, so I'm just, and then also I've got a poetry book coming out, which is called As the Seas Turn Red, which that should be, I'm putting that out myself. I just need to kind of put the final touches on it, one last editing pass. So I'm hoping to do that probably February.
Yeah, so that's a pile of stuff right there.
Pretty much, yeah.
You're like, I just, a couple things. That's, from a writer's perspective and how long it takes to write and edit and do all your stories, and that's a lot of stuff. I think you should be very proud of yourself that you've got all this out, this year, and it's being received very well. That from what I've seen, and I know personally, I absolutely adored ABODE. That was such a good book. I don't get a chance to read as much as I used to, and I still love to read, but it's just one of those things where it's like, I try to find balance between all the things that I like to do, and unfortunately that seems to be the thing that gets neglected the most. So when I do pick up a book and it just latches right onto me, I mean, I think I read that book in it was 3-4 days maybe, and that's quick for me now. And that's, I spent a lot of, every time I had some free time, I was reading on it because the story was so captivating. And it was a very, to me, different twist on the whole haunted house, that sort of paranormal sub-genre.
Thank you. I guess, as far as I totally understand what you're saying about, it's just kind of harder to carve time out for things. And I think that's kind of one of the downfalls of living in this technical age where we've got, all this stuff on our phones and we're always on our computers, is that I feel like my attention span has shortened. And I've realized that lately, even watching a movie, I tend to pick up my phone and check it a couple times. And reading sometimes it's hard to carve out time to do it. I think not just for those reasons, but also just for me personally, I spend so much time on a computer that my eyes are just tired, by the end of the day. Yeah. But, but the good thing about it is it's kind of made me a little bit more, picky. If something doesn't draw me in, then I'm I don't feel, obligated to finish a book that isn't doing much for me by the end of the first couple chapters. So I think there's that.
I absolutely understand that because I do the same thing. I was the type of person that before, whether I really liked the book or not, I would be I paid for it. I'm going to sit and read the whole thing from start to finish. And, now I try to give myself, the first half of the book most of the time, depending on the book's length, because I know sometimes it takes a little while for stuff to get going and, depending on the book, but there's been a few that I've started and just been not for me, on to the next thing,
Absolutely. And it's funny that we go there because, I just started rereading Salem's Lot. And, if there ever was a slow burn book, that's gotta be it. It's a little bit actually difficult to keep going. It's I know this gets good, but and not to critique King or anything, but that is, doesn't exactly grab you from the get-go.
Yeah.
It's not one of his faster-paced books.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. That's one of my favorite Stephen King books, and it's been a long time since I've read it, but, I remember, I specifically remember with that book, that one I kind of started and stopped a few times before it really grabbed me and pulled me in. And that was during the time period when I used to read 2 or 3 books a week, as a general rule. And, that got to the point, I remember that when I'd start it and I'd get, a few chapters through it and be and I'd put it down for a little bit, read something else, and I'd come back. But there was always something that pulled me back to it.
Yeah, and then, this is gonna get good, so it's all right.
And then when it started really getting interesting, I was all in, but yeah. So, I try to give books the benefit of the doubt. If there's something that I like about it, I will stick with it a little longer than if it's just something, there's those books you start and you really know within, the first 50 pages that it's not for me, type thing.
Yeah. Life is too short for bad books and bad coffee. It's one of my mottos.
Unfortunately, I haven't learned that with movies yet. When I watch a movie, I have a tendency to finish those whether they're good or not most of the time. So, but that's one of those things. So, you're not doing just horror. You were saying you've got a poetry book coming out. You've got a fantasy series. So have you always kind of been that genre hopper, type?
Actually, yes and no. I actually would say that I started out writing more fantasy than horror. And then, just as I got older, my tastes got kind of darker and, I started delving into horror, which I don't really understand why, because I always liked reading horror, but I just, for whatever reason, started out writing fantasy. Dawn actually is not, it was written 20 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And it's just, I've gone back and edited it, but I would, occasionally try to get it published, and then I kind of have ADD when it comes to doing shit that I should be doing, as far as marketing and publishing and stuff, and I would just set it aside, be okay, I'll try in a couple, and just start something else, and it just kind of got, it was sitting there, and, the trilogy is done. I just, I'm going to do some revisions and updates to it, but, it's not that book was a very much learning experience for me. Fantasy is very different to write because you've got to create the world. I
find fantasy to be, maybe, fantasy and sci-fi in general tend to be very, very much a more descriptive genre than maybe horror, drama, or, whatever, because like you said, you do have to create the world, so you do have to be a little more specific when describing things and, really fleshing it out because you need to immerse your reader in that world. And I know a lot of fantasy tends to be kind of slow burn, a little more slow burn, especially earlier on in series.
Yeah. And, I think there's a pretty good range of, what's out there. And, like, for instance, Dawn, what went into world building Dawn was a combination of things that you wouldn't necessarily would go together. It was inspired, initially by, Spartans and the Spartans' way of life. And then, also druids. And then, different bits of history, different bits of paranormal stuff. And it just kind of just became its own thing. It's almost like you're baking something. You're putting a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and, just always trying to create more layers and depths just, to the characters and the world and the storyline. So it's definitely, it's a challenge, but it's also, it's pretty rewarding. I actually, I don't know that I can say this because I've only really published 2 novels, but, I am really happy with Dawn. I just, that story has kind of come a long way with me, and I've grown with it and gone back numerous times and updated this and changed that and made it tighter and made it more complicated, and so I'm happy with it. And hopefully it gets a decent reception.
Yeah. I think it will. I think I know you put that out a couple months ago when that come out.
It's either October or September, but, I just, I was really happy to see it, see the light of day, and I'm starting to get some reviews rolling in on it that are positive so far. So
yeah, I just was going to mention that it seems like it's kind of got a slow momentum build to it lately. That I've been noticing. I've been seeing a few, you talking about it a little more and seeing some reviews pop up here and there for it. So
yeah. It's, that's one of the things about genre hopping. Like the first book I ever put out was a book of horror poetry, and then I put out a horror novel, and then now I'm putting out a fantasy novel, and then I'm about to put out another book of poetry. So, I'm kind of all over the place as far as that. So it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. Like, I'm not going anywhere. It's, so I just, like I said, my plan to take over the universe is progressing. One book at a time.
Right. I think it's interesting too because you see so many authors, I think traditionally pretty much stuck to one, genre or whatever, that was good. They might dip their, toes in the water, so to speak, here and there, but for the most part, your horror authors write horror, your fantasy authors write fantasy, and your sci-fi writers write sci-fi, and, now it seems like, especially, I've noticed, at least it seems like in the last few years, there's more people kind of bouncing around a little bit and just putting up what they want to put out, which is kind of interesting to see that's, because you have, I have a friend of mine who's a very, very successful Western writer, and, he's right up there with like Louis L'Amour and Zane Grey as one of the top authors on Amazon. So if anybody's interested and likes Westerns, check out Brad Dennison on Amazon. His McCabe series is very good. If you're into that sort of thing, and I think you'll love it. So just a quick plug for Brad. But, he also writes kind of like a horror fantasy, crime noir thing. It's really weird.
That's interesting.
But he's, and I'm sure, I don't know if I'm not going to delve into it too much, but he, hasn't, he's kind of put it out and then taken it down and wrote under a pen name and then kind of put it out under his own name. And I believe the first couple books are out now under his name, but, I think that was the only way you would see authors doing that before, is kind of putting it under a pen name because don't want to confuse the fans or, be associated with this genre or, whatever. It's kind of interesting to see people just be like, nope, this is me. I'm putting out a fantasy and I'm going to put out a book of poetry and I'm going to put out a sci-fi book and I'm going to put out a horror book and just kind of rolling with it. It's kind of cool to see that happening and being kind of accepted and embraced by the readers.
I'm kind of like a squirrel. I'm like, ooh, I want to go over here. No, I want to go over there. No, I want to go over here.
Yeah, I know when the New England Speculative Writers, put out the call for submissions for that. I started out really when I first started writing years ago in high school. That's mainly what I wrote was fantasy. I didn't really write a lot of, I wrote fantasy sci-fi type stuff. I didn't really write horror, even though I was more, probably more of a horror reader back then. Mm-hmm. But I haven't written anything, like straight up fantasy sci-fi type stuff for quite a while. So, I said, what the hell, and kind of dove into it and wrote a piece for it, and I didn't get in, but that happens. And I kind of have that story sitting there now and I have no clue what I'm going to do with it, but it's, one of those things it's like if it hadn't have been for that call out, I may have not dipped my toes back in that water, but I did, right. I did find myself kind of enjoying writing that and doing something a little different because it was one of the things I was passionate about when I first started writing, that really kind of got me into writing.
It is really fun. And I think it's always going to be an important genre, if nothing else, just for the sheer escapism of it. There's something very soothing about just being able to, like, when you lose yourself in a good fantasy book, just go to a completely different world and just, I don't think that's ever going to go away. And it's actually, it's for the most part been a pretty solid genre. So I think it's always going to be there. And it's definitely fun to write. It's a little bit challenging. Like I said, as far as the world building, but there's a lot to it. But at the end of the day, no matter what genre you're in, your story is story. You've still got to have kind of the same elements as far as like a decent plot and characters and all that good stuff that goes into it.
I know I found it kind of difficult to write a fantasy short story as opposed to a horror short story because, you're limited most of the time. For those of you out there listening who don't know how anthologies and that sort of thing works, usually they tell you, okay, you have between 3,000 and 5,000 words. That means, mm-hmm. So you've got to make the story fit. And especially in fantasy and sci-fi, where you're trying to kind of create your world and your story, it becomes a little more difficult because you can't get too wordy with your descriptions, but you also need to be able to, move your story along or your scene or however you're approaching that story. And so it becomes I found that way harder to be able to get into that word range that I needed to with that than I did with anything I've written for a horror story.
It is, and it's actually like really good practice on, just trimming down words and seeing like, okay, well, I just took 2 sentences to say this. Can I maybe say it in 4 words if or 5 words or, so it's a good practice to, cause I tend to run wordy myself. Even when I know I'm trying not to be wordy, I still end up sometimes running a bit wordy. So I've, learned to have to act like, I forget who it was that said this. It's, that old adage about, kill your darlings. Yeah, very true. Like, get rid of those words that aren't really that, that aren't popping or, that could be doing double duty that aren't. Yeah. So it's, definitely a lot of, it's a good skill and good practice, I think, to try and chop your stuff down.
Absolutely.
Think of it like, it's like you're boiling a soup down or something, or I don't know.
You gotta let it simmer, and you've gotta, you gotta be able to stir it a little bit in order to make it come out smooth.
I guess I'm going with food analogies today, because a little while ago, I was like, it's like a recipe, I'm like, you're boiling it down. So I don't know what's next.
It means you're hungry, apparently. You haven't had dinner yet this evening.
Actually, I just had some peanuts, so I'm good.
So, so you've got all that stuff and you're getting some momentum going and your name out there and, so what is your plans this year going forward and, what are you looking to accomplish in 2019?
I'm not well, for 2019, I've got, the poetry collection. That's called As the Seas Turn Red. It's all ocean based. So there's everything that you could think of that is associated with the ocean. So it goes from like ocean mythology to, sea gods to environmental stuff to ruins that are under the ocean to ghost ships to sinking ships to the crazy stuff that lives in the ocean to whales to beaches. So I just incorporated, a lot of that into it. Joseph Schmelke, who is another Mainer, he did the cover and he did an awesome job on it. Like, I still love that cover.
Yeah, I think you posted that online. That's a really cool, it almost looks like a tome to me, like an old school.
Yeah.
It's got that feel to it.
Nailed it. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's the next thing I've got out, coming out the gate. As far as books, I've got a couple short stories. I already went over those. Waiting to hear back on a couple things that I've got out there, knock on wood. Don't know, but, watched Inbox never seems to offer anything. But, and then after that, I'm working on a new horror novel. I'm not going to really tease the topic, but so far it's called Oblivion. And then I've got book 2 of Dawn to, polish up and get ready. And I think that's good for 2019, I think.
Yeah,
get all that done.
That's a lot to take on, especially, when you're the majority of it, if you're self-editing and, you're trying to market and push stuff and work on stuff at the same time. It's a very interesting dance to try to, find time to do all of that stuff and, still be, effective and consistent with your working on stuff and getting stuff out there. And it's very, I don't think a lot of people realize how time consuming that it really is, I think most people think when a writer puts out a book, once they're done writing it, that's it, it's out of your hands. Oh, I wrote it. I'm done. It's not at all, the final push. It's just that's the easy part, really, is writing it. It's the hard part is all the crap that comes afterwards. To me, anyway, absolutely. I think so. Writing is still a challenge in itself, but as someone who hates self-promotion and marketing and all that sort of stuff, it's the part of it I don't like. So it becomes.
I think we can all agree with that. Like, it's kind of a necessary evil, but it's just, it's not fun, but, you gotta get yourself out there.
Yeah. Yeah, it becomes one of those things where it's like, the old adage is you gotta spend money to make money. And especially if you're self-publishing, posting on your Facebook and social media and stuff like that is only gonna go so far. I think anybody, especially, I know you're going through some publishers, so it might be a little bit different, but I know with me, like, from the first book to now, you definitely notice at first everybody's really excited you're putting a book out. And everybody's very supportive. And the next time it wanes a little bit, and the next time after that it seems to wane a little more, and the next time after that it wanes a little more, till it gets down to you maybe have a core group of people that are still interested, and then everybody else is just, whatever. So you can only do so much on your social media accounts. I mean, they're good to reach out to people, but at the same time, you kind of have to start putting money into ads, to getting out to people that you don't know personally or whatever, because it only goes so far.
Yeah, and there's definitely different approaches. I know like conventions are one route for people to reach audiences, and I'd really love to do more conventions than I do. Like this year, I know I'm doing NeCon. If they do NoCon again, I'll do that. I'll probably do the New England Spec Pick one, which is in Portland, and that's probably going to be all I can do this year. But, you know, and hopefully down the road, I'll be able to go to like World Fantasy Con, and I'd like to go to Stoker Con when it's over in the UK. And then there's just different avenues, but I mean, you're almost like screaming into the void, I guess, in some aspect, just trying to get people that are interested in, in what you want to read. And it's kind of weird, like the time that we live in, there's good and bad to it. It's in a way easier to reach readers, but you're also, I hate to use the word competition because I don't think art is really a competition, but you're also trying to make yourself noticed among, literally thousands of other writers.
Well, I think,
it's definitely a long process.
Well, I think not just with writing, but with anything, music, films, anything artistic, I think your average person is being so inundated constantly with content that it's very easy to skip over stuff or just ignore something. You have, I like this author, and this author. So I only have enough time to read a few books, so I'm just going to read stuff by them, and I'm not going to pay attention to these other writers. Or, I think it's just to the point where the good and bad points of self-publishing are, before, when you did the traditional route, you had marketing teams behind you. You had to go through a process to get a book out. And I'm not dogging on self-publishing. I'm a self-published author. But it gets to the point where
Excuse me.
Anybody and everybody can put a book out now. So there's constantly people that probably never would have written a book or put a book out are putting books out. And it comes, so, you're getting that avalanche of material, and I highly encourage anybody, if you want to write a book or anything, to go do it, and see what the process is all about, because it's a lot harder than most people think it is. I'm just going to sit down and write a book. It's not that simple. But I think the problem is, and I was guilty of it when I first started, is the quality of the content may not be there so much, with a lot of it, because you don't have those people looking it over that you might have otherwise in a traditional sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I chose to, I'm choosing to self-publish, the ocean poetry collection, just because I want proceeds to go to, different ocean conservation. And I just wanted more control over the formatting of that one, because I'm a little weird on how I format poetry. But everything else I've done has been through a traditional publisher. And, but I mean, it's kind of, again, one of those half full, half empties. It does give people a platform, but I don't know. There's, like you said, there's a lot of people out there, and it's hard to get the quality. I mean, I do know a lot of authors, or more and more authors, are kind of dipping their toes into maybe like self-publishing novellas and smaller things like that. Or even just a short story, just to kind of get their names out a little bit, and like whatever works, like to each their own. I don't have a, I don't know.
No, I hear what you're saying. And I think the other thing we're seeing is 4 or 5 years ago, at least, back when I think I kind of caught the end of the whole Kindle, self-publish wave, where there was a lot of people self-publishing books, and there still is, but, there was a lot of people self-publishing that were making a living off and self-publishing their own material. I think you're seeing less and less of that now, because a lot of people jumped onto that simply because they saw people self-publishing and put stuff out,
Yeah. I mean, it's, and there's also people that are, great at marketing and, maybe making up some of the difference with that. I don't know. I'm just going to write.
Oh, I hear you. It's been one of those things. It's been a weird year for me as far as writing goes. I I think this is the first time since I put my first book out in 2013. I think this is the first time that I didn't release anything in during the course of a year. I don't think I published a single thing this year. I don't think I put out even a short story or anything this year.
There's nothing wrong with that. I think that, as creative types, we all go through kind of waxing and waning phases. And, just to me, the important thing is if you're not writing, then, take things in, read, watch movies, just experience things. And, it'll kind of all go back into that little cauldron in your head and bubble up at some point. There's no law that says that you have to put things out at, X time or whatever. Just go with the flow.
And that's one thing I do like about self-publishing. I'm not under that deadline to get stuff out or have to have something out. I wrote a lot this year. It was weird though, because it was kind of came in spurts all I wrote was short stories. And I would get really fired up for like a month and bang out 2 or 3 short stories, and then I wouldn't write anything for 2 or 3 months. And it was kind of like that all year, and almost everything I wrote this year outside of a couple of short stories, was all geared for submissions for something, so it was very specific what it was for. And, I'm not gonna, just for those listening, just to let you know, I submitted, I think, to 8 anthologies this year, and I didn't get picked for any of them. That's just how it goes. It's, sometimes you nail it, and sometimes you don't. It's just one of those things.
It's definitely part of the business, and we all go through that.
It's part of, and I'm not going to lie, and I won't say that it's not very disheartening, especially when you think you've written something that's really good, and then, it's like, man, I'm really proud of this piece, and you put it out there, and within first thing right off the bat, no, this isn't what we're looking for. It's like, it happens, and it does, I think, it messes with you a little bit, especially, and this is something I don't think you hear a lot of writers talk about, is it's very disheartening. You can't let it define what you're doing, I guess, but at the same time, when it's, repeatedly one thing right after the other, and you're not getting into any of these, and you're like, man, what am I, you start to doubt yourself and question, what am I doing wrong? Why am I not getting picked? Because something else I've noticed, and it's not a slight on any of the authors, but it seems like with a lot of different groups, it's kind of that, and I'm not trying to be like gender specific, but I don't really know how else to term this, but it's kind of that good old boys club. Like there's a certain group of people that always seem to be in every single anthology or every single, and it seems like it's always the same people. There's nobody ever new. And it's not knocking them because those authors are all really damn good and there's a reason they're in there, but at the same time, it kind of makes you go, why am I bothering? Kind of same thing. I'm just curious if you kind of feel that same way about some of this stuff, or if this is kind of just my perspective from it, or whatever. It's kind of an interesting something I'd like to get a kind of a different point of view on, I guess.
I think as far as that, you probably got a couple things. I think what you may be seeing are probably, at least in part, anthologies that were invitation only, where they were extended and, an offer like, hey, we'd love to have you put in a story with this. Which, these are not to name names or, I'm not, but, people that are at a kind of certain levels where publishers feel comfortable that if they, invite someone into an anthology and they get a story back, it's going to be a decent piece of work. And also just, people that are, maybe can write faster and send things out faster. It's kind of just there's also scheduling, some people, you said you put out 8 stories last year.
Yeah.
Other people may have done, more than that, less than that, and then there's the whole, there's no accounting for taste, it's just, it's an interesting industry, but, one thing, I guess, not to kind of segue, but I am happy to see that, you remember when computers and Kindles and everything first came out and bookstores started shutting down, and looks like we're seeing a little bit of a reversal of that, where bookstores are doing well again, and the print book has not gone by the wayside like we were all afraid it was. That kind of makes me happy.
I think it's like that in general for physical media seems to be making a comeback in general, whether it's records or, Blu-rays or whatever. But this year, it really seems like, I don't know if it's because our generation is kind of leading the charge, because we're that generation now where we're starting to get more disposable income, and we are kind of going back to the things we loved growing up and like having. I know personally, if anybody's ever seen my office, I have like over 1,000 movies on my, stacked on my wall, physical copies. It's just. Yeah.
Yep. And we're kind of the same way. It's like, we do get some things that are just in digital form, but we also like just, by we, I mean me and Asa, we always get we're trying to get hard copies of things like books and, especially movies. Like movies are one thing where it's, so many people are just doing Netflix or Amazon or this streaming service or that streaming service. Well, you can't get everything on those.
Oh, exactly.
And there's so many movies that you kind of forget about, and you'll be like, we like to go to, flea markets and thrift stores and all that. And you'll be flipping through a bin of something and you'll be like, wow, I totally forgot about this movie. And it's not on Netflix. It's not on Amazon because of, actually, I just watched a movie. This is kind of, well, I don't know if it's a really good example because I was eventually able to get it from Google Play. But do you remember that movie Dark City? Came out in 98.
Yes, Sutherland. I have it on VHS.
It was so good. I hadn't seen it in 20 years, and I was just like, huh. I had a very vague memory of it. I was like, I'm going to watch this again, and I was like, this movie is really good. It's kind of a forgotten gem, I guess.
And that is something, and part of the reason that I like to buy movies, because I'm the type of person I get into moods where I want to watch certain things, and a good chunk of the time, those things aren't available on the streaming services because of the type of movies that I like to watch. So, I mean, I do like some of your big box office type hit things, but that's never been my wheelhouse. My wheelhouse has always been those high grade B action movies and horror and, sci-fi type stuff. So a lot of the stuff isn't readily available on the streaming services, or it's the type of stuff that's available for a little while and then goes away. So if I'm able to buy it, if I really like something, I try to purchase it, one, to support the artist, and two, because I want to have that when I may go 3 or 4 years and not watch a movie that I have in my collection, but it's there when I want to watch it. That's
right, exactly.
So I don't have to be like, oh crap, I need to try to track this down on 14 different streaming sites or, whatever.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not that I'm against digital stuff because, it's great to have a Kindle to take with you when you travel, rather than lugging 10 books around. Trust me, I've done that, and I'm like, this is stupid. Or when you're driving in the car, it's great to have an MP3 player or use your phone instead of having 30 CDs in the car. So there's definitely good things about digital, but I mean, at the end of the day, it's almost like you have all this stuff and it doesn't really exist. You don't have anything that you can actually hold or, feel or look at, so it's I like that with, CDs, and music, we're pretty big vinyl collectors. There's just something cool about the art, when it's that size and, that, as opposed to just looking at the picture on your phone. So I guess then again, it's I don't live in a castle, so it's I can't keep everything, but,
I'm running into
I have a hard time parting with books and movies and music.
I'm running into that problem with my music collection. It's getting to the point now where I am running out of room to display stuff. So I'm gonna have to start binning some stuff and being a little more picky about especially my VHS collection because they take up so much room. But to me, there's just something about a VHS case when you pick it up and you look at the feel of it and the look of it, and it whisked me back to those days of browsing the aisles of the video store and, looking at the movies and going, okay, I talked about this with my friend Eric Marner from the Movie Freaks a while ago when he was on, and it's like, you would go to the video store like on a Thursday or a Friday, depending on if it was, like a 1 or 2 day rental or what it was, or, if you could rent a couple movies. I have 2 movies I can rent. I gotta make this count, It's not like if I don't like it, I can just find something else on Netflix or, whatever. It was, so, you would peruse the aisles and you would pick one out and find something else and then put that one back, and you would play the shuffle game. And a lot of times it was based on the artwork. That was what drew you in, because it's like, well, I don't know, the artwork to this is pretty badass, but this is cool, but which one is the coolest of the artwork and descriptions? And when you got those movies, you had a tendency to watch them whether they were bad or not, because damn it, I spent an hour picking this out. I am gonna watch this,
Yeah, those days of not Netflix, but Blockbuster and pizza were awesome. Like when I lived in Tampa, we actually, or the neighborhood I lived in, I just happened to be across the street from this little mom and pop movie store, and it was so weird. It was this cute little couple, and they would have like cookies out on the counter and stuff, and they had all this crazy underground stuff. They had like the entire Dario Argento collection. They had like all these cult underground horror classics, and they had written up little cards to describe each one. It's like they had like, what's that? They had Cannibal Holocaust in there, and like they have a little card that, kind of describes it. And like, this is banned. And it was just such a unique place. Actually, I think it was called Unique Video, if I remember correctly, in Tampa. And, and they went out of business, and it was just kind of sad. And all they had in there were, VHS tapes, which I'm kind of aging myself a little bit. I also have a VHS collection.
Hey, nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, and I've still got cassette tapes too. And, I've still got a bunch of science fiction and horror novels from the 70s and 80s, and yeah.
Yeah, I feel like for some weird reason our generation is the collector generation. Like we seem to like hold on to our nostalgia maybe more so than other generations did in the past. And I love it for the fact that I love having all this stuff, and I can go in at any point in time and, browse through my movie selection, and, I have something there that I like and want to watch. But it's always,
right.
It's like having my own little video store almost. I can go in and, and browse the aisles and stuff like that. So it's just weird. It's weird how stuff comes back around though. It's like, and something about the digital thing that I will say, something I do like about the digital thing is there are a lot of movies that I have given a chance to that I may not have otherwise, because I knew if I didn't like them, I could just watch something else that I turned out really liking, and enjoying.
Right. Right.
So that is a plus there, but I'm just afraid, especially like, with Netflix, not saying it's probably not going to happen, but if Netflix decided to shut down tomorrow, there's a whole pile of movies that's the only place they're on, Right.
And, there's other streaming services, but like just kind of an interesting, I guess, side effect of all of this is, back when we used to all rent movies from Blockbuster or whatever, every movie that you put in would have like 2 or 3 previews. And I always love watching movie previews, and trailers and everything. And, I actually just kind of realized, like, you can see the trailer on Netflix, and on most streaming services you can watch just the trailer, but they also don't show you trailers for other movies.
Yeah.
You still see previews if you go to a theater, which is almost kind of like overkill in the other direction.
I was going to say there's two friggin' many trailers.
Yeah, now there's like
movies.
half an hour of previews, and I'm ready to go by the time the movie even starts. So that's kind of its own.
I have a tendency now when I go to movies to show up either right when it's supposed to start or like 10 minutes after it's supposed to start, because it's not just the trailers, but there's 5 commercials and this and this and this, and then there's 3 or 4 trailers, and it's just like, get to it. It's like, the movie's already almost 2 hours long. I really don't want to be here for another half an hour. So.
Right.
I'm very excited because I think I'm going to the theater next weekend for Glass, the new M. Night Shyamalan movie.
I haven't heard about that one.
It's, have you seen Split and Unbreakable?
I've seen Split. I have not seen Unbreakable.
Unbreakable is the first movie of the trilogy because Split is part of a trilogy. Spoiler alert for those who haven't seen Split yet. But it ties into the movie Unbreakable. I think you would dig Unbreakable. It's really good. It's probably my favorite.
I remember hearing this. Isn't it like spoiler alert, isn't it like the detective in a diner?
He's not he's not a detective. He was in a terrible accident and he's the only person that survived of this train wreck.
Okay.
It goes through the story of he thinks he's, has superpowers basically, and Samuel L. Jackson's character basically turns out to be his nemesis of the film. It's a hard movie to explain without giving a lot away, so I'm going to leave it at that, but it is probably my favorite or second favorite film by him. It's absolutely awesome film. It's a little slow to get going, but once it gets into it, it's amazing. So I would highly recommend you check that out because I think you would probably dig it. Ask Ace about it. I think he's probably seen it, I think, but, you'll have to ask Asa anyway, but,
okay.
But yeah, so it's the third part of that series anyway, and when I watched Split, I really didn't know how it tied into the film, so, I'm not going to give it away, but when I watched it, I just was like, holy crap. And then it sets itself up so perfectly for a third film. And I knew they were setting it up by the way, the film plays out. And it's once, it got into where it was going. So I am absolutely excited to go see that in the theater. And I don't get I went to the theater, I think, more this past year than I have in, probably the last 5 years combined. I think I might have saw, a dozen or 15 movies in the theater this year, which is a lot for me.
That is a lot.
For me, I used to go a lot. I used to go almost every week, for a long time. But the theater, again, this is something else I kind of bitch about, and it's gotten a little better, but theater experiences, people in general don't have a lot of consideration for other people. They're very self-centered, I think, a lot of times. And theater experiences have become really annoying. I don't know if
I totally agree. I actually rarely go to the theater. The last couple movies I saw it, and then usually when I visit my mom in Tampa, we'll go to a movie. So this year we saw that the Nutcracker movie. But one thing I just cannot stand is the sound of people chewing. It just, I want to murder somebody. So, usually when I do go to a theater, I try to go for, a matinee on, a Monday or something.
Oh, yeah. I try to get that weird time. It kind of works good for me a lot of times, not this time of year because a lot of times I'm worried about the weather and the weather being shitty, but, during the summer, a lot of times, during the middle of the week, I'll stop into the theater that's by where I work, and I'll go see something by myself, and there's usually 4 people in the theater because it's at a weird time, So I kind of try to do that. I've gone to a few movies this year that were either sold out or close to it, which made me happy because that meant people were going to see stuff. But at the same time, it was oh, come on, really? I'm going to have to deal with Johnny over here on his phone every 5 seconds taking pictures and, the 5 teenage girls in the front that won't shut up the whole time and, just this and this and the guy over here asking his wife questions every 5 minutes because he doesn't understand what's going on with the movie and, that sort of thing. And, I will say, one of the best theater going experiences I have ever had this year though. I went and saw A Quiet Place, which I don't know if you've seen that film yet or not.
I did. I didn't see it in the theater. I saw it when it came out on, Netflix or whatever it was on.
So A Quiet Place, the premise of the film is, the creatures are based on sound. It's a very quiet movie. There's not much of a score. There's very little talking. There's very little anything. That theater was dead silent the entire time. Because I think everybody was afraid if they made a noise, somebody was gonna literally either beat the shit out of them or scream at them. Because there was so much tension built up. So when stuff happened on screen, everybody would freak out, and it was awesome. That was that reminded me of going to horror movies back when I was younger, and people just having a good time and enjoying the film and not worried about their fucking phone and or chatting with their friends, because if they did, they knew somebody would either get them removed or scream at them, that sort of thing. That was kind of nice. It kind of felt like old school, going to an old school theater experience. But it's weird. And I'm not trying to shit on anybody, but it gets to the point where it's dude, if you can't be off your phone for 5 minutes, you shouldn't go to the theater. I'm sorry, but if your phone is up your ass that bad, I mean, I'm on my phone a lot, but as I think most people are, but if it's to the point... It's
just common courtesy. Just turn it off when you get to the theater,
what, it's fine, whatever, if you want to look at it during the previews or whatever, but if you cannot literally be off it for an hour and a half, you probably shouldn't go to the theater, it's that sort of thing, but...
Yeah.
And
it's actually like I said, technology, I think, is collectively shortening our attention spans.
Absolutely.
I read somewhere that said, phones actually are an addiction because we're, a lot of us, when we're checking our phones, you're looking for likes or comments or feedback, and that's actually, I can't remember where I saw the study, so I may not be.
Well, it's a positive affirmation endorphin release, of serotonin or whatever.
Yeah, it does, which is kind of makes me just want to throw my phone in a pond, but like everybody else, I kind of need it to function.
Well, it's one of those things. It's become a necessary evil. I don't know about you, but I rarely ever actually call anybody, outside of a handful of there's a handful of people that I physically call and talk to on the phone.
Not so many with me either. Like my mom, pretty much.
Basically immediate family and a couple of friends that occasionally, if I need to really be specific with them about something or, make sure we're making arrangements for something, I want to make sure nothing gets lost in translation. I don't get on the phone and just call people most of the time. I just shoot them a text, and that's great because you can answer on your own time. You don't have to worry about doing it right that second and this and that. But, I think because of the disconnect with technology, we are starting to, I'm trying to, think how to phrase this, because of the disconnect with technology, we're losing our ability to communicate with people effectively in person. It's making us more withdrawn from that social interaction. Yeah,
absolutely. Which is, I guess it's kind of like an interesting thing of us living in Maine, because, what's the weather up where you're at right now?
It's, with the wind chill and stuff, it's probably about -10, -11.
Yeah, I think we are, let me look real quick. We are at 21 degrees, but that's without the wind chill.
Yeah.
So, obviously, we get more isolated this time of year, so that, technology's good for that.
My phone says it's 17, but feels like 10, so.
Yeah.
But it's.
Yeah, mine doesn't allow for wind chill, but,
Yeah, it's been below zero up here the last couple days anyway. It's been cold. The other, Friday night was brutal. It was really cold Friday night. But, and that's the thing where I love technology. It's allowed me to connect with other movie fans and authors and the podcast and stuff like that. It's allowed me to reach out to people that I may not have otherwise been friends with or been able to talk to. it's good in those aspects, especially for those of us who do live out in the middle of nowhere. And if anybody's ever, out there has ever been to rural Maine, I'm sure there's other places like it all over the world, all over the U.S. and all over the world, but, I can't just go shopping as far as like, if, to like a mall. I know I'm dating myself by the mall or whatever. I have to drive 45 minutes to an hour. There's a few little stores here and there where I live, but there's like 1,000 people in the town I live in. It's a small town. So,
Yeah.
If it wasn't for technology, I wouldn't have made a lot of the friends that I've made over the years, of people that I consider very good friends, that I talk to almost every day, type thing. So it's got its good and its bad points. I think it's just not that this, as a general rule, I think we need to find a balance between physical social interaction and web-based social interaction, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
we went out, last night there was a show at Gino's. So my boyfriend Ace's band played, and then, Shabti, I can't say it right, Magog, and then, Coffin Birth. That was a good show. And, just going back to weather a bit, it was damn chilly.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It was really cold. But they still had a decent turnout. But it was just kind of funny, like watching people walking through Portland, because people were still out and about, and it's just, everyone's kind of got like the puffy coats and the big hats and the thick boots, and they're all carrying like, takeout bags of hot food that they're taking home, and it was just, but I guess to just winter a little bit, like I love winter. I think it's beautiful. I do love the isolation, but I am glad for technology, and that like I don't feel as isolated as I did, before. I was able to keep in touch with people with smartphones and Facebook and this, that, and the other.
Oh yeah, no, and something as far as this is another good thing I think about technology, and I don't get into political shit on this show, and I'm not going to now really, but it kind of does, I guess, fall into this point of, I think being able to connect with people outside of your normal bubble makes you a little more aware or sympathetic or just, as the kids would say, woke, about stuff, like that you may not have had a first-hand perspective of otherwise. So that is also, I think, plays into one of the good points about technology, but you can flip that around, and it also has made it easier for people to do just the opposite of that too,
Absolutely. For me personally, I try to take care and make sure that I'm not living in an echo chamber. And, that's one thing, I guess, kind of to segue a little bit, like one thing that has changed drastically, over the last 20 years. I used to work in a newspaper, and like, I remember growing up, it's like you would see, evening news, and CBS and NBC wasn't necessarily that different. And newspapers, like, back in their heyday, they were very much bound to present facts. Well, now, that the newspapers have, not completely, but many of them have shut down or folded down or, downsized, with the rise of the internet, there's just not that policing. It's like anybody can say that they're, a journalist, and what you see is a lot of opinion pieces being passed off as news. And then, but so like, like you're saying, it's kind of, you can go both ways. It's great to see opinions, from all sides and from, different corners of the world that you wouldn't have necessarily heard of before technology. But, there's also, you got to weed out, like, the sources that aren't that credible, and,
And I think it's getting better, but as far as people calling bullshit on stuff when it happens, or researching it maybe a little bit more outside of just looking at it and saying, "Oh, this is fact."
Yeah, I've fallen for bullshit.
Oh, I think everybody has. I mean, it happens. there's something that comes up, especially on emotional topics, I guess would be the best way to put it, something that you're passionate about or something that pops up, and you have a tendency of reading it and being like, holy crap, oh my God, this happened, blah, 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 or you repost it or you comment or do something and then come to find out it was basically just somebody pulling a prank or just not really knowing what they were talking about, having all the facts or whatever. So I think it's getting better, but at the same time, it's still a problem.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where you gotta really think, and I was talking with a buddy of mine at work the other day about this, is the internet really is only like 30 years old? It's still a relatively new, technology. I don't even think it's 30. I mean, the internet as we know it is probably 15 years old, really.
I'm gonna go with about 20 just because I remember, around 2001, I do remember, some of my coworkers having internet access and email. And
I had internet back in the late 90s, but it was nothing like it was now.
Right.
I'm going to say, okay, think of like MySpace, which would have been like 2002, 2003. I think that's when the social media culture kind of started happening. Mm-hmm. And so, if you want to date it at that sort of thing, the internet has been around for, probably 25, 30 years, but the internet as we know it has really only been around for about 15-ish, So it's just weird that I think it's still also, even though we're so inundated with it on a daily basis, it's such a huge part of everybody's life, but at the same time, it's still pretty new. So I still think we're kind of finding, we're still figuring out the checks and balances of it and what's making it work and, kind of that sort of thing. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
So, we're getting towards the end of the show, and I did want to talk a little bit about movies with you. So you have been posting as well as I have, which I need to post my movie for today, cause it was kind of a fun thing to do. It's like, nominated me to post my, 10 favorite movies of all time with no explanations and this and that. So you've been posting yours and I've been kind of posting mine too. And, so I want to tell me a little bit about your 10 favorite movies, just real briefly, cause I want to touch on some of those cause it was kind of an interesting list.
My 10 is actually probably going to end up being 15 because I suck at,
I counted trilogies as one film, like Lord of the Rings and Star Wars. So.
I've seen other people doing that too. I'm like, okay, a trilogy I can kind of see, but, oh God, what so far? Donnie Darko, which that movie just, confuses me and blows my mind every time I watch it. I love it. The Doors was another one. I think Val Kilmer did a great job in that as Jim Morrison, who was one of my favorite, artists. What else did I put? As Above, So Below, which is one of those movies that kind of got hit or miss overall ratings, but I absolutely loved it.
And I watched that this past October. I thought it was one of the better found footage type movies that I had seen because there was there was a good reason for them filming it like that, because some of the found footage thing is, I'm not super huge on found footage films, but that was effective. It was creepy as shit. And I liked the way, and it didn't end the way that I expected it to, which was even better.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that was pretty awesome. I don't mind a lot of found footage movies. Some of them, I think when it's done right, can be really effective. Blair Witch, I saw that when it first came out in the theater, and I was actually at the screening I went to, the directors were there, and, everybody was asking them, is this real? Because, when the trailers were coming out, I don't know if you remember, but nobody really realized that
I remember
fake,
do you remember the website that they had up for that film that was like, help us solve the Blair Witch, blah, blah, blah. There was like a whole website and like newspaper clippings and all this cool stuff on it that made you think it was a real deal. And I
don't remember that. I do remember, I think, was it Discovery or one of
MTV or some, I think it was MTV, yeah.
I don't think it was MTV, but I don't know, maybe it was, but like whatever channel it was that was affiliated with them, they put out a documentary that went with the movie, and that documentary, I didn't realize it was, basically marketing material. I thought that documentary
scared the shit out of me. That was so creepy. It was just like, whoa, And then I remember, but that was a, we could kind of tie that back into marketing, and that was the early days of the internet. I don't think you could do it now because people are just so quick to like ruin stuff like that. But back then, man, that was an original way to market your movie. That was all online, and people, as we were saying, it was the early days of forums and movie groups and different stuff, and so they marketed it that way, and it was very effective. And I think, it's part of what made that movie what it was, is such an experience.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's actually a couple of found footage ones that I thought were good. Ghoul is one that I thought was pretty well done. The VHS movies, they're really intense, but I mean, they were pretty effective as far as being horror movies, and that, like, they scared me. So, that's, I guess, mission accomplished with that.
Honestly, for the most part, I absolutely love horror, and I love to write horror, but I don't find a lot that really scares me so much anymore. Either, jump scares, yes, but like just that sense of dread, like, holy crap, I think it's just, I've seen so many horror films and read so many novels and things over the years. It takes a lot to really, really freak me out these days. But.
And as a writer, like, I try to keep that in mind when I'm writing, because, like, I scared myself when I was writing ABODE, and I'm like, if I'm not scaring myself, I'm not going to scare anybody else. So
there is some generally creepy stuff in that book.
That's what I've heard.
I thought was
obviously I have to read with lights on, but
I thought there was a handful of moments that I don't really want to. I don't think it would really too much be a spoiler because I'm not being specific, but the disappearing house is creepy as shit. I love that part. And the room at the top of the stairs there, or bottom of the stairs, I can't remember. It's been a little bit since I read it, but I remember that weird room was super creepy. So, and there were some moments within involving the father too that just I thought were very well constructed and very creepy moments, and it was a good descent, I guess, of that character's mental stability.
Yeah, that was not a happy person.
No. So it's was there anything else? Was there anything you saw last year that really like blew you away for movies?
I really liked Hereditary.
That's still on my list. I still haven't gotten to that one yet. I have it on Vudu, but I haven't watched it yet. So
I'm curious to see what you think. I think I stand with a lot of people in that. Like, I wasn't entirely in love with the very ending, but for the most part, like, that movie was intense. Oh God, I'm trying to think what I even saw this year. I'm blanked out. I can't remember.
I forget.
Other than Hereditary, I can't remember what I've even seen. I know I watched a bunch of movies.
Did you watch the new Halloween?
No, not yet. I haven't seen that one yet.
That comes out on video this week, I believe, if you want to check it out. I really enjoyed it. It very much feels more like the original films than I would say anything after part 3, as far as like the feel of the films. and it's really funny, actually. There's a lot of comedy in it, which was kind of a nice break. It's different, but it's good, you know. I saw that in the theater, and that was a really fun theater experience.
Yeah, which kind of like, I guess to go back to my 10 movies here, I haven't included any comedies, but there are a couple, like, you know, I love, What We Do in the Shadows. I know, and you know, like, this one movie that I'm about to name is probably, like, people are gonna, like, slap their faces and be like, oh my god, you actually like this, but Talladega Nights cracks me up every time I see it. Zoolander, like, I
love Zoolander.
I'm kind of picky about comedy, but, like, I laugh at some of the dumbest movies ever made, like, and
you know, a buddy of mine, me and my friend Eric were talking about comedies the other day, and it's like, I won't say that I don't like comedies, but I have a very particular taste of what I think is funny. So
yeah,
I don't go out of my way to generally watch comedies unless I know it's kind of geared towards what I think is funny to begin with. There's a lot of, like, you know, those, I call them one and done comedies where I can watch them once and it's like, all right, that was all right. You know, I didn't hate it, but it's not really my thing.
Right.
But then there's those ones that I can go back to, like Monty Python and the Holy Grail, or,
yeah, like that just never gets old.
One I just rewatched, Grandma's Boy, that I think is absolutely hilarious. You know, stuff like that I will go back to and watch over and over and over, and I think they're brilliant and funny as hell, and they get me, but I don't dip into the comedy well very often. I like comedy, but I'm not really a comedy. That's not my go-to, I guess, when it comes to movies.
I'm kind of the same, like, I think, like, and I don't know if it's got something to do with being a writer, but I'm always, like, really interested in, you know, storylines and character development, and, like, you know, a lot of comedy is just, like, kind of ridiculously zany.
I think that's why I like Edgar Wright's movies so much, you know, like Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz and End of the World and, World's End and Paul and, you know, he didn't write Paul, but Paul was Simon Pegg and Nick Frost. I love those movies. I could watch over and over and over and over, and I crack up every time still, you know, and it's like, those are the type of comedies that I have a tendency to gravitate towards. And I kind of think it's the same reason, like you're saying, is because you look at things from a writer's perspective and a structure and the story, and comedies tend to be just silly randomness a lot of the time.
And I mean, not to say that they're not well written, but it's just like, that's just not what I'm looking for. Like, I want to sink my teeth into something, and, like, you know, I want something to move me, and, you know, but then again, sometimes it is good just to laugh. So there's that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. There's a good horror comedy called The Babysitter on Netflix. If you haven't seen that yet, you would probably dig that. It's a horror comedy.
I haven't seen that. I do know there's a metal comedy coming out. It's set in Europe. It's about a band that's trying to get, I guess, onto Vakken or something.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about, and I can't think of what the hell it's called. I can't think of the name of it. There's also a metal movie coming out, or it's already out playing the festivals, about mayhem. It's called Lords of Chaos. Lords of Chaos. It's directed by Jonas Ackerlund, who was the drummer for Bathory, I think, maybe?
I have a feeling I'm either going to absolutely love that movie or absolutely hate it.
I've heard it's pretty intense and pretty awesome, but there's also a lot of lighthearted moments in it because I'm hearing really good things about it. So I'm not huge into black metal. I mean, I do like some of it, but so I may not have so much of a vested interest in it, but I know you are a big black metal fan, so it will be interesting to see, because that is, I think even people that aren't super familiar with black metal but know metal are familiar with Mayhem and the whole story behind it. If not, look up the story of Mayhem online and be prepared to go down a rabbit hole of just bizarre, crazy weirdness.
Speaking of rabbit holes, another one that didn't make my list and probably should have is Alice in Wonderland. Like, okay, so I'm, as far as, like, going back to my movie list, I'm like 2 days behind, and I think I have like another 20 movies that I wanted to include, so I don't know what's going to end up on mine's
pretty standard for the ones that I, you know, that I
remember you had Jaws on there, which is obviously a great movie.
That is flat out my favorite movie of all time. I've probably watched that more than any other film, and I still find it as engrossing as the first time I watched it. And I've probably seen it at least 50 to 60 times now. So it's just one of those movies. But, you know, I can't say really that there's anything on my list that I think would be totally shocking to anybody that it would be on my list, as far as that it's not a great movie or it's not a fun movie or whatever. I mean, Critters maybe, but I love Critters. That's just one of those cheesy, fun favorite films for me.
Yeah.
You know, I had the Lord of the Rings trilogy, the original Star Wars trilogy.
Those were awesome.
You know,
yeah, those are classics. Like, how can those not make your list? Like, you know, this is why I can't choose.
Red Dawn, because whether...
The original or the remake?
The original.
Okay.
Whether people, you know, a lot of people don't like that movie or think it sucks or cheesy or whatever. I watched that. I was 6 or 7 years old. I was probably way too young to watch that when I watched it. But that was another movie that just captivated the hell out of me when I was a kid, you know, and it kind of scared me, to be honest. But it was awesome, and I watched it over and over and over. So I always will have a very special place in my heart for that movie, because it's one of the films that made me a movie nerd, that made me love movies, you know. And Jaws is the same way. And another one that will be on there probably today is Night of the Living Dead 90. The remake, not the original. I love the original, but the remake is kind of like my film, because, as I've said on the show a lot, I discovered Stephen King, that movie, and the Misfits in 6th grade.
That was definitely a monumental year.
That was like
the whole world out there.
That trifecta of things just made me go, wow, I really like, you know, I think I was 12 at the time, you know, so it was like those three things all together right at roughly the same time. And that's what made me a horror movie fan. And once, you know, because they all kind of hit together, and, you know, then I saw Silence of the Lambs, and then I saw, you know, all this other stuff, and it just made me, you know, Army of Darkness, even though it's more of a comedy than a horror, but, you know, films like that, I kind of saw all those right around that same time. So that stuff really, I had watched horror movies before that, but that's what made me a horror movie junkie. It made me start seeking out horror and, you know, really getting into everything horror related. So that's why, you know, that one would be on my list. And
yeah, I would also include, Elm Street, for that one. My favorite is actually Elm Street 3. I don't know why, but I always love that one the most. I think I have an Asylum obsession.
Because
Session 9. Oh, there's another one I forgot from my list.
Session 9. Oh, that's such a creepy movie.
It really is.
If you've for those of you who are listening, if you want one of the best ghost movies ever, in my opinion, go find Session 9, because that movie is legit disturbing. At least I think it is. So
yeah.
Because of the way it's shot, the way it plays out, there's a few scenes in that movie that just really give me the willies. So
yeah,
it's one I haven't seen in a long time. I really need to go back and revisit that one. I let somebody borrow it and never got it back, so I don't have it in my collection anymore. I
lent it out, and I'm actually not sure if I got it back or not. I've got it on VHS. I did. I'll have to check.
I had it on DVD. I remember buying that blindly from a friend recommending it, and because everybody, when it first came out, the horror group that I was a part of, everybody's like, dude, everybody go see this. This movie's, you know, everybody's like, this movie is amazing. Go see it. Nobody's talking about it. Nobody, you know.
It is.
And I went and got it, and I watched it. I just was like, holy shit, what did I just watch? And those type of movies, generally ghost stories, for the most part, really don't get me that bad. That one did. You know, so when I get a ghost story that's effective, it's awesome.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's a great one that I really, really enjoy. And, a movie I just watched for the first time last year from, I think, either 1980 or late 70s, I don't know if you've seen it, is The Changeling.
I saw one Changeling. I don't know if this isn't the one with Angelina. No, that wouldn't be.
That
Angelina Jolie, I think.
That was a remake of the original, I think.
Really? Okay.
Yeah,
I saw that one.
This one has got, George C. Scott is the lead.
No, I haven't seen it.
You want to watch a good ghost story? I'll give you, it's long and it's a slow burn, but oh boy, is it worth it. And it is legit creepy and disturbing. So if you can find the original Changeling, like I said, I think 1979, 1980, my friend Rob Kohler sent that to me last year because I'd never seen it. He's like, dude, I'm buying you a copy and mailing it to you because you need to watch it.
Wow.
But yeah, it's getting, we are getting way on here in time. So, thank you very much for coming on and doing episode 100 with me. I know it took us a little while to get here, but we made it with the rescheduling and people being sick and stuff coming up, and it's been hectic. Before we go, is there anything you want to plug?
Yeah, and I think you might be, kind of on board with this one. Just this one mostly for locals. Actually, before I go there, thanks for having me. Hopefully I'll come back for this 200. And I definitely put me on the 00s, like once a year. That'll be awesome.
The even number episodes that are, like the big momentum every type ones for sure.
I'm down. Yeah, I'm sure we probably could spend the whole hour just talking about our movie lists.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that's always the hard part is I try to keep it within a reasonable time frame, and not cause there's a lot of times like right now we could probably go for another hour or two pretty easy if we really wanted to, but I try to keep it within, a certain time frame just because I don't want to talk about everything all at once, gotta save some for the next time.
Right. Yeah, I guess in closing, I guess I'll again plug the Final Summons, which is coming out from New England Spectic Writers. I believe you can still pre-order the ebook for just 99 cents. The Haunted House book, which is coming out from Flame Treat Press. Those are just absolutely gorgeous books. I'm thrilled to be in it. And, also, are you going to be at the, benefit for Jason? The show that's going on?
I am.
Bangor?
I'm planning on it right now. I'm supposed to be doing a song with Shallow Path.
Cool. Okay, cool.
As far as I know, yeah. So for those of you who don't know and might be in Maine and want to go to this, a dear friend of ours, was unfortunately brutally murdered, a couple months ago, and, they are doing a benefit show for him and his family to help them with expenses. And there's like 12 bands playing, Asa, who is Morgan's boyfriend, is playing bass for Seize the Vatican, which was the band Jason played bass in, because Asa was the original bassist. So kind of a one night only thing, correct? That he's going back and playing with them for that?
Yeah. Yep.
So it will be, it will be a good time. If you guys can make it out, that's, January 27th.
I want to say it's the 26th. Whatever that Saturday is, like January 20 something.
The last weekend in January.
Yeah, the weekend after next, I believe. So, sounds like I will see you there.
Yeah, so it'll be good to actually catch up with you in person.
Yeah, definitely.
I haven't seen you since Slayer, so.
Yep.
Are you going to Ozzy and Megadeth?
Yeah, I believe we are. I kind of can't resist. It's like an hour away, so for once we don't have to drive to Boston.
Even though I've seen Ozzy 3 times and I've seen Megadeth a couple times, it's like, you know what? It's pretty much in my backyard. So, myself and Pete and a couple of our other friends are going. So we ordered tickets a couple weeks ago. So I'm pretty excited for that. That will probably be like my one show for the year. Big show. So, also real quick, where's a website people can find you on to check out your stuff?
You can actually find me on morgansylvia.com. I'm also on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Cool. I'm out there.
The usual social media.
Yeah.
I know sometimes people have like weird, social media names or tags, so sometimes you kind of gotta get that out there. It may not just be under the name,
Yeah, most of my stuff, my website's under Morgan Sylvia. I've got a Facebook author page that's under Morgan Sylvia. And then I think like the Twitter and Instagram, they're probably under either M Sylvia or M Sylvia 1916 or something like that. Yeah. But they all are kind of linked a little bit together, so you can find me.
All right. Before we go, I'd like to thank my sponsors, the Maine Cannababes. You can go to www.mainecannababes.com to find out more information about cannabis legislation, the medical side of things, rules and regulations. Also, their new 2019 Maine Cannababes calendar is out now. You can order a copy. I believe the first round of calendars has sold out, but they are going to do a second printing. So you might want to get on that because I don't know if they will do another one. All the money from the calendar goes towards charitable causes. This year, I believe it is the Maine Lyme Foundation, or Mid-Coast Lyme Foundation, which deals with people with Lyme disease, which is a crippling subject here in the state of Maine, and a lot of other places. Lyme disease is a brutal thing if you know anybody that has it. So, the proceeds from the calendar are going towards that, and great people. Again, www.mainecannababes.com. I'd like to thank Morgan again for coming on and being my episode 100 guest.
Yay!
And also, remember kids, opinions are like assholes. Everybody's got one, and I will see you sexy animals on the flip side.
It's intermission. Rise and stretch time. Time to refresh yourself and visit our snack bar. Got a yen for hot popcorn? Your favorite soft drinks are sparkling cold. The juicy Frank sizzling hot. There's delicious coffee, freshly brewed, and all kinds of ice cream and candy to tempt you. Showtime will be announced loud and clear to get you back to your car in time. So stretch your legs. Come to the snack bar now.
Thanks for listening to Average Joe's Drive-In. If you'd like to talk movies or contact the show, add our social media pages. You can add us on Facebook at Average Joe's Drive-In Podcast, on Twitter at TWJ Author, on Instagram at Thomas Washburn Jr. You can also hit up www.thomaswashburnjr.com for more information about the show and related links. If you'd like to support the show, you can buy TJ's books on Amazon. Just type in Thomas Washburn Jr. in the search. Books are available in Kindle and paperback formats. If you have Kindle Unlimited or Prime, you can read the books for free and money will be earned by the pages read. It doesn't cost you anything and it supports the show. Until next time, you've been listening to Average Joe's Drive-In.